June 18, 1967, America saw Jimi for first time. What he did with guitar changed rock forever. June 18, 1967, Monterey, California, the Monterey International Pop Festival, the first major rock festival in American history, a three-day event that brought together 90,000 people and acts from across the musical spectrum: rock, folk, soul, pop, blues, all converging on the Monterey County Fairgrounds. This wasn't just a concert. This was a cultural moment, a gathering that would define what rock festivals could be. The organizers included John Phillips from the Mamas and the Papas, record producer Lou Adler, and Paul McCartney serving as an advisor. They'd assembled an incredible lineup: The Who, Janis Joplin, Otis Redding, The Grateful Dead, Jefferson Airplane. And on Sunday night, they had a secret weapon they were about to unleash on America: Jimi Hendrix. Jimi was relatively unknown in the United States despite being American. He'd been playing clubs in New York for years, the Café Wah, the Night Owl, struggling, barely getting by, backing other artists, playing sessions, trying to get anyone to pay attention to what he could do. He'd played behind Little Richard, the Isley Brothers, Curtis Knight. He was skilled, professional, but invisible. Then Chaz Chandler, former bassist from the Animals, discovered him at the Café Wah in September 1966, took him to London, and suddenly everything changed. In Britain, Jimi was huge. Hey Joe had gone to number 6 on the UK charts. Purple Haze was climbing. British guitarists Eric Clapton, Pete Townsend, Jeff Beck were talking about this American who'd come to England and shown them things they'd never imagined possible on guitar. But back home in America, Jimi Hendrix was still just a name some people had heard, a rumor, a guy the British were excited about for some mysterious reason. American radio wasn't playing him. American record labels hadn't signed him yet. He was famous everywhere except where he was from.
Monterey was supposed to change that. The festival organizers, including Paul McCartney, who'd recommended Jimi for the lineup, knew they were introducing someone special. They gave Jimi a prime slot, Sunday night, late, after The Who. That created a problem. The Who were famous for destroying their instruments on stage. Pete Townshend would smash his guitar. Keith Moon would kick over his drum kit. It was their signature, their finale, their way of ending a show with chaos and spectacle. Jimi knew this. He'd seen The Who perform in London. He knew that if he went on stage right after them, after they'd just destroyed thousands of dollars worth of equipment, the audience would be in a frenzy. They'd expect more destruction, more chaos, more spectacle. Backstage before the show, there was tension. The Who were preparing for their set. Jimi was watching, thinking. Brian Jones from the Rolling Stones was there, introducing both acts. The air felt electric, competitive. Everyone knew something special was about to happen. Pete Townshend approached Jimi. "Who's going on first?" he asked. It was a challenge disguised as a question. Whoever went on first would have the disadvantage. The second act would be able to top them, to be the one everyone remembered. "You go first," Jimi said quietly. He knew what he was doing. Let the Who do their destruction. Let them smash their instruments. Let them think they had won. Then he'd show them what real transformation looked like. The Who went on around 11 p.m. They played brilliantly, loud, aggressive, perfectly controlled chaos. And at the end, as always, they destroyed everything. Pete Townshend smashed his guitar into the stage, into the amplifiers, reducing it to splinters. Keith Moon kicked over his drums, cymbals crashing. The crowd went absolutely wild.
The audience thought nothing could top that. They'd just seen one of rock's most explosive acts destroy the stage. What could possibly follow? Then Brian Jones walked on stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, from England, the Jimi Hendrix Experience." Jimi walked out wearing a bright orange shirt, a red boa around his neck, his white Stratocaster slung low. Mitch Mitchell sat at the drums. Noel Redding picked up his bass. The crowd was still buzzing from The Who, skeptical, waiting. Jimi started playing. The first song was raw and aggressive, matching The Who's energy, but with something extra, a precision, a control, a musicality that showed this wasn't just chaos for chaos's sake. This was controlled violence, purposeful aggression. By the second song, the crowd started to understand. This wasn't just another British invasion act. This was something different, something unprecedented. Jimi played his guitar in ways people had never seen, behind his head, between his legs, with his teeth. But it wasn't gimmicks. Everything he did sounded incredible. The notes were perfect. The tone was perfect. He was playing the guitar like an instrument and using his body like an instrument at the same time. He moved across the stage like a dancer, like a preacher, like someone possessed. He'd fall to his knees while playing impossible solos. He'd lean back until it seemed like he'd fall over, then snap forward, guitar screaming. The crowd couldn't believe what they were seeing. This was 1967. Most guitarists stood still, focused on their playing. Jimi was doing things that shouldn't be physically possible while playing things that shouldn't be musically possible.
About 15 minutes into the set, during an extended jam, Jimi did something that would become iconic, something that crossed the line between performance and ritual. He pulled the guitar around to the front of his body, leaned over it with his entire being, and started making sounds that looked and sounded exactly like he was making love to the instrument. His hands moved across the strings in ways that were simultaneously sexual and sacred, profane and holy. The sounds coming from the Marshall amplifiers were moans, screams, whispers, cries of pleasure and pain. His hips moved with the rhythm. His face showed ecstasy and agony. He was making the guitar speak the language of desire, of longing, of union. The crowd didn't know whether to cheer or look away. Some did both. It was that raw, that intimate, that intense. This wasn't entertainment. This was witnessing something private made public, something sacred made visible. Then Jimi knelt down with the guitar, cradling it like a lover, and the sounds became softer, more tender, more vulnerable. He was telling a complete story: seduction, passion, intimacy, aftermath, all through a Fender Stratocaster and a Marshall stack. No words, just sound and movement and electricity. When the song ended, the crowd was in shock. They'd never seen anything like that. Nothing in American rock music had prepared them for what they'd just witnessed. But Jimi wasn't done. For the final song, he played a cover, an aggressive, feedback-drenched version that pushed the volume and intensity even higher. The Stratocaster screamed and wailed. Jimi's fingers flew across the fretboard. The drums pounded. The bass thundered.
And then, at the peak of the song, at the moment of maximum intensity, when the feedback was reaching levels that bordered on painful, when the drums were thundering like war drums, when the whole performance felt like it might explode, Jimi stopped playing music and started playing theater, or religion, or sacrifice, or something the crowd had no words for. He turned to face his amplifier stack and created pure feedback, a sustained, screaming note that filled the entire outdoor venue, bouncing off the hills surrounding Monterey, creating a sound that was almost visible in its intensity. Then he turned back to face the audience, guitar still screaming through the feedback, and pulled something from his pocket with deliberate, ritualistic slowness. A can of lighter fluid. Ronsonol brand. The kind you'd use for a cigarette lighter. People in the front rows saw it first and started yelling, pointing, trying to warn others, or maybe just expressing shock. Security guards looked at each other, confused, unsure if they should intervene, not wanting to ruin the show but not knowing what was about to happen.
The band kept playing, locked into the groove, trusting Jimi. And Jimi knelt down slowly, reverently, placed the white Stratocaster, this guitar that had just been his voice, his lover, his weapon, flat on the stage floor, and started spraying it with lighter fluid. Methodically, thoroughly, covering the body, the neck, the pickups. The crowd didn't know what was happening. Some thought it was a joke, a fake-out, performance art that would stop short of actual destruction. Some thought he was cleaning it in some bizarre ritual. Some understood immediately what was about to happen and couldn't believe it, couldn't process that someone would actually do this to an instrument that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Jimi pulled out a match, struck it, and held it up for the audience to see. The flame danced in the night air. Then he dropped it onto the guitar. The Stratocaster burst into flames.
90,000 people gasped, a collective intake of breath so loud it was audible even over the amplifiers. The guitar burned on stage, flames rising, paint bubbling, wood charring, and Jimi stood over it watching, like a priest at a ritual, like a shaman completing a ceremony. He knelt down again and started coaxing more sounds from the burning guitar, touching the strings carefully, making it scream and wail as it died. The feedback from the flames interacting with the pickups created sounds that had never been heard before. Electronic, organic, dying, being born. Then Jimi picked up the burning guitar, lifted it over his head, and smashed it down onto the stage. Once, twice, 3 times. Pieces of burning wood flew into the crowd. People scrambled to catch them, to have a piece of what they'd just witnessed. Finally, Jimi dropped what was left of the guitar and walked off stage. The band followed. The fire was quickly put out by stage crew. The crowd stood in stunned silence for a moment, then erupted into the loudest, longest applause of the entire festival. Backstage, Pete Townshend found Jimi. "You bastard," he said, but he was smiling. "I smashed my guitar and everyone thinks I'm crazy. You burn yours and everyone thinks you're a god." Jimi smiled back. "You smash yours out of anger. I burned mine out of love." That performance changed everything. Overnight, by Monday morning, everyone in America who cared about music was talking about Hendrix. Record executives who'd been skeptical about signing a black guitarist who played rock music, who'd worried about how to market him, whether white audiences would accept him, whether black audiences would understand him, were now calling their offices in a panic, demanding to know why they hadn't already signed this guy, why they'd let him go to Britain, why they'd missed the most obvious stars since Elvis. Radio stations that had ignored his British singles started playing them on repeat. Magazine writers and music critics who'd been at Monterey filed urgent stories, struggling to find words adequate to explain what they'd witnessed, reaching for comparisons. Hendrix as shaman, as preacher, as revolutionary, as God, and finding them all insufficient. The guitar burning became the single image that defined both Jimi and the era of transformation he represented. It appeared on magazine covers within weeks. It was the centerpiece of the documentary film D.A. Pennebaker made about the festival, released as Monterey Pop in 1968. That footage, Jimi kneeling, spraying, lighting, burning, smashing, became one of the most replayed moments in rock history. It was referenced in histories of the 1960s, in analyses of performance art, in discussions of what rock music could be. That single act, the burning of a Fender Stratocaster on stage at Monterey on June 18, 1967, became shorthand for an entire cultural revolution. But the people who were actually there that night, the 90,000 who witnessed it in person rather than through a screen or a photograph, understood it wasn't just spectacle or shock value or gimmickry. It wasn't Jimi trying to out-crazy The Who or grab headlines or sell records through controversy. It was transformation made visible. It was sacrifice made public. It was Jimi taking rock music, which had been created by black artists, but commercialized and dominated by white performers, which had started as blues and gospel, but had been sanitized for white audiences, and claiming it as his own in the most dramatic, undeniable way possible. It was him saying, "This is what I can do. This is what rock can be. This is what happens when you stop playing it safe and start playing it true. Watch me. Learn from me. This changes now." Years later, decades later, people who were in the audience that night would describe it with a kind of hushed reverence, the way religious people describe witnessing miracles or supernatural events. They'd talk about the moment the flames rose from the guitar, the orange and yellow fire against the black California night sky. They'd talk about the collective gasp that rippled through 90,000 people simultaneously. They'd talk about the moment they understood they were watching history being made in real time, watching the exact second rock music changed forever, watching the transformation from one era to another made visible through fire and sacrifice and a man who dared to destroy what he loved most. A photographer named Jim Marshall captured the burning guitar on film. That photograph, Jimi kneeling over the burning Stratocaster, flames rising, his face intense and focused, became one of rock's most famous images. The owner of the venue later said they found pieces of the burned guitar scattered around the stage area. Audience members had grabbed fragments as souvenirs. Each piece was kept like a religious relic, proof that they'd been there, that they'd witnessed the transformation. Within a week of Monterey, Jimi had multiple record deals being offered by American labels. Within a month, his face was on the covers of Rolling Stone, Downbeat, and a dozen other music magazines. Within 6 months, he was headlining arenas across America, one of the biggest rock stars in the world, his albums going gold, his concerts selling out within hours of tickets going on sale, all because of 17 minutes on a Sunday night in Monterey, when America saw him for the first time and watched him burn a guitar, not in anger like The Who, not in destruction for its own sake, but as an announcement, a declaration, a transformation ritual that said the old rules no longer applied and the new era had a prophet. June 18, 1967, the night America met Jimi Hendrix, the night he showed them that rock music could be art, performance, ritual, and revolution all at once, the night he proved that sometimes destruction is the most creative act possible. If this story of transformation through fire moved you, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Share this with someone who needs to remember that the most memorable moments come from taking risks no one else would take. Have you ever witnessed a performance that changed how you understood art? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like this video for more stories of the moments that defined music history.